Hello, everybody, and welcome back to Sunday Civics Citizenship Lab. I want to thank all of you for being in the classroom with me as we dive a little bit deeper based upon what we learn on Sunday. Those of you who tune in and listen to Sunday Civics, and we've delved a little bit deeper and giving you some practical tools to deepen and strengthen your civic engagement. And I am delighted to be back in this space with you. This is our the final wrap-up session, and I'm looking forward to hearing all of the feedback from you all. When we post this session, there will be a survey link, and the purpose of it is to do two things. One, I want to hear from you exactly what you learned and how you engaged in the content we did over these 4 sessions. And then secondly, to help design what the next 4 sessions look like, what you are looking to do so that we can tailor the Citizenship Lab to meet the moment that we are in, but also to meet where you are locally in your civic engagement practice along the ladder, which we'll get to in a moment. So make sure that you go back to this post, look for the survey link, and you complete the survey so that you can help shape the next Citizenship Lab session, so that can continue our civic engagement from that regard. The other thing, and I'm just going to do some announcements at the top, it is an election year. And I know I spend a lot of time talking about that civic engagement is more than just elections. But the other thing I want you to know is that even within an election year, even within elections, there is so much more than the November general election. Everybody is marching towards that point. But as you saw, there are primaries, there are ballot initiatives or ballot questions that may be on the ballot. There are other races, right? So not just Congress. The president won't be on the ballot this year, but you have state races that will be on the ballot. You have congressional contests that'll be on the ballot. But as you go further down, there may be additional things on the ballot. So the last time we had a big election, I put together a handy guide that some of you already own, but maybe you need a new copy for a new election cycle. If you remember, Get Vote Ready. See. Yeah, there you go. Get Vote Ready is the Journal for an Empowered Voter, put together by me. You can check the link and get this journal. And this is your guide to being a proactive and informed voter for this cycle. Because in it, you can identify who represents you now. You can also take you through what important dates and information you need to know for this cycle. Some primaries are early in the calendar year. Some are in the middle. Some are, a bit later during the summer, right? So it's important that you know what the dates are, so that you can show up. But you also need to know what's on the ballot before you get there. And you also need a plan of how you plan to engage in this election cycle. Are you going to donate to candidates? Are you going to volunteer for candidates? When you show up on election day, are you going to vote early or are you going to vote on election day? Are you going to help people register? Are you going to call voters in your neighborhood, in your building, and make sure that they turn out and know the information as well? Are you going to have a candidate form because there are 42 people running for, different seats? This guide, your Get Vote Ready journal, allows you to plan this properly. And there is an opportunity for you and your friends, you and your block association, you and your tenant association, your HOA, your students, because I have a lot of schools like getting this for their students to engage in the election cycle, particularly if this is their first time voting. So you can get copies of this and give it out. You can use it as an opportunity to do workshops and come together in your living room, in the park, and plan your civic engagement together. So this is an opportunity for you to do that. So grab a journal, you share it with folks, get multiple copies, There may be people who are going to be voting for the first time in your family. This is a great civic engagement gift to give folks. Easter's coming up, put it in the Easter basket, right? So you want to make sure that people are prepared and ready to engage, not just on federal elections, but local elections. And this year is a year that local elections are really showing up. And it's an opportunity for us to gauge in there. So for our quick announcements, one, get Vote Ready Journal so that you can be properly prepared and plan your voter engagement for this year and help others plan for their engagement. There's also like sample WhatsApp messages and text messages in there as well that you can use. The second announcement is when the survey link drops, when this post, when the video is posted, make sure you take the survey. I want to hear your feedback, what you learned. It's our first time doing the Citizenship Lab. And so to be able to give feedback to help improve and deepen the information that is presented for the next session, and then have influence and impact on what happens next session is really important as well. So please do that. And then we're going to go ahead to our wrap up of this final session. And let's put it up on the screen. Let's recap what we learned in this session so far. I call it the arc of what we learned. All right. The first thing that we learned is that civics is a practice. It is not an event. It is not a theory. It is not just information. It is practice. It is specifically action. Civics is action. We also learned about the history and the tradition of citizenship schools, and particularly that it was about freedom and education and participation in the overall process. We got a deeper understanding of power, how power is used, how you can harness power to make change in your community. We talked about mapping institutions and the decision makers in our communities, in our state, in our county, wherever they may be, so that we know clearly and we can communicate clearly, which is the other more important thing. When people are expressing their frustration about something happening in their community or not happening, it's important to map the institutions and decision makers, because then you can point people to the direct thing that we need to do in order to make change. And we talked about landscape analysis. We talked about how to survey our community, identify what is happening, identify the decision makers, and what needs to happen in order to move things. And then we talked about the activation ladder, moving people from awareness to action, which takes us back up to the top when we're talking about civics. And civics is action. It is not something that is happening to us, but it's something we are actively participating in and engaged in all the time. Thanks so much. So we began this session with the level set of watching the Lowndes County and the Road to Black Power documentary. It was strategic and it was important. And the purpose was to show you that organized people who are committed to civic action as a practice can move things along and make change. It was also important to show you that there are ups and downs, there are hills and valleys, right? Your first campaign or your first community action may not result into all of the goals that you have, or you may even fail the first time. But having the organized people working collaboratively and working together, even if you don't get to your end goal the first time, it is still a win in having an organized, powerful community. We also talked about the citizenship schools and the modern civil rights movement in general. And, they met in places like church basements, in living rooms, at hair salons, and barbershops. And the purpose wasn't simply education. The purpose was preparation, right? They were preparing people, they were informing people, giving people the education about what was happening around them, also giving them practical information and tools for them to actually improve their lives and just function in the society and in the community. But people came to class to learn how power worked so that they can walk out of the door and change the conditions of their lives, right? So it wasn't just being able to improve their community. It was, we can come together and we can collectively do something to clean up the park and take care of it and create an association that raises money and continues to invest and engage in the park, right? But then there's the next step of like, how do we use the power to ensure that the taxes that we are paying, that the government, that the county government, that the state government actually invests our money and our resources into the thing that we want. So then it's more than just us being caretakers. It is our levels of government also contributing to make sure that that is happening. And then challenging anything that is prohibiting us from doing it. So instead of monies and information always going to one part of town and building up Prospect Park and making it beautiful, well, what about our community parks? What about the things that are closest to our community, and making sure that there is equity and parity, and we have a say-so in terms of where our resources and our dollars go. All right. So civics as a practice, not theory, using the tradition of citizenship schools and freedom education to actually go improve our lives and make change. All right. This is part of our historical tradition. And when we are learning history, it is not just for us to repeat facts. It's not just for us to, play Jeopardy. And, you can name dates and times and individuals and maybe recognize them based upon their faces or lithographs or anything like that. The purpose of learning the history is also to be able to act. That's what, like, my overall, even as I was giving Black History Month speeches all February, I was talking about us not just being able to recite history, but actually to be able to practice it. And so the most important lesson of citizenship schools wasn't just the literacy, it was the agency. It was the empowerment and the when people realized that they were not powerless spectators to democracy, but they were participants in helping to shape it, right? And so when we think about civics and civic engagement, that's the reason why yes, elections are a huge part of it, but I try to detach it from there, because the biggest part is you having the audacity to believe that you should be involved, you should have a say, and that you can make the change. And that's not just the elected officials. That's not just the donors. That's you having a say-so, you believing so, and then you working with others, and you all combining your audacity, together to actually make the change from that standpoint, right? Because we built institutions with that audacity. We organized locally. We believed that we had, our voice needed to be at the table. We needed to be the decision makers. We needed to have control. And so having that and exercising our collective power is what got us through that movement. And so what I need us to do now is to fill our hearts and fill our minds with that history, not just so you're knowledgeable about it to pull it out, at parties and things, but that it actually moves you to act. Because, those of us who are here in Narrative and Nubia, one of the greatest things that even for myself, listening to Dr. Carr, listening to Karen, listening to others bring knowledge to our forefront, if you are listening to that and it doesn't move you to want to do something, something is wrong. Because our ancestors are speaking to us through that history, right? Our DNA gets riled up, the history gets riled up, and you're like, how am I contributing? What am I building? What am I doing? Like, it should provoke something to you. And for those of you who are in the church tradition, they say that, when you sit in testimony service or when you sit in service or whatever, if you feel like things moving, it's because it's like speaking to you, your spirit was irked, right, like you were troubled by the things, because the spirit is like, jumping up in you or whatever. And that's what compels us to shout and to engage in praise and other things like that, because it is the spirit moving you to act, moving you to shout, moving you to sing, moving to play tambourine, right? Like that is all connected and is a part of our tradition in that standpoint. So based upon what we have learned so far, I have something that I want to bring, a question I want to bring to the top of you. And y'all can put it in the chat. Those of you who will watch back later, you can put it in the comments as well. This is just a reflection from where we've been. What idea from this class changed the way you see civic engagement? What idea from our time in these 4 sessions, what idea from this class changed the way you see civic engagement? This is really important because reflection is an important part of learning, right? You want to be able, to be able to receive the information, but then you have to digest it and determine, what was best for you. I'm teaching my children this now. My 10-year-old engaged in an action that was completely disappointing to us. And so we made her go research about that topic and write a paper about it. Because, of course, you have a teacher and me as parents, we're going to make you write a paper and do some research and read some books. And so that's what she had to do. She had to disconnect from Roblox and all those things, and she had to go read and research something, and she had to write a paper. And so the first iteration of the paper, she was just spitting facts in the paper. She was really copying, pasting, and then we had to tell her that that's plagiarism. She knew what plagiarism was. She was just trying to get out of it real quick to get back to Roblox. But we told her she has to reflect. She has to tell us what she learned, tell us about the experience, how it made her feel, how will her behavior change based upon what she learned, and things of that nature. What did she feel about how her dad talked to her about being disappointed? How did she feel about, my response to her? So she had to reflect on that. So reflection is a huge part. And even for those of us who read ferociously, we'll know that after you read a book, you spend some time thinking about how did that make me feel? What did I think about it? How is that connected to something? And so for this, where we are challenging what we have been taught about what civic engagement actually is, I want to hear from you what idea from this class changed the way you see civic engagement. So I see some of the responses that folks are posting. You could also, I know for a number of you who have shared about the landscape analysis, being able to see your community in a different light as you are thinking about the decision makers. I know that a number of you responded to that was something that you hadn't thought about before in identifying the decision makers. So that was one I know that was that folks have commented on. Another one that folks commented on was expanding civic engagement beyond Election Day. Because they were taught that was the focus. The other one I know was shying away from the word power. And that's interesting because in the Lowndes County documentary, where they talk about the inflection point when Black power, right, was such a thing that people were afraid of. And I personally believe it is by design to take the power, the word, even the reference that you individually, you collectively could be wielding power against, people who are presumably should have all of the power. I think it's by design people remove that from there. Even schools and other places I go, when I try to when I'm giving presentations, and they were like, "Oh, they want to mute power?" Right? Just the word itself makes people sort of shudder. And even in exercising your own power, have you ever found yourself trying to find a different word so it doesn't seem so aggressive, right? We're taught power is aggressive. And yeah, we are supposed to be aggressive in our collective power so that we can get what we need. So being uncomfortable with the word power, I think society tries to, do that to us to make you believe that you don't have any, but we have to reclaim that and take it back. So that is definitely one that we should talk about. All right. So we are in this moment where we have learned now that democracy, one, is not built overnight. It requires collective power and action. And for those of us who are in civic practice on a regular basis, we know that government, democracy, all of those things are not something that happen to us, but it's something that we can build together. And the citizenship schools in that tradition, we know that we start at the ground level of our activation and our engagement. We use opportunities that exist. It could be a midterm election. It could be a fight against a treatment plant. It can be, gentrification, whatever the inflection point is, and being able to use those opportunities to build collective power and then continue on. June Moses, who most of you know, who works with me, uses these skills in our tenant association, right? Consistently building upon, fights as small as, getting garden beds in front of the building, to things that are larger in terms of lease renewals and being able to engage with the corporate landlords on making sure that they are not taking advantage of people in the building. And so you can do very small actions, which I always recommend to start with small actions because it's quicker. People can see their influence on a regular basis, to going to larger issues, which is, beating back corporations or the federal government in of itself. But the folks that were involved in this work, they didn't produce spectators. They didn't produce people that were watching from the sidelines. As we saw from the documentary, you saw they continued to grow, and you have more and more people who were, sharecroppers, worked in the other people's homes, who they didn't, they weren't all wealthy people. They weren't the banker. They were everyday people, but they saw themselves. And once they were empowered with knowledge and information, they became part of the organized power to move things forward, to challenge power, and to expand upon their freedom. And so that is what we are now in that tradition of. Civics is not information, it is action. And so now that you have this information, like I said, your spirit should be disturbed enough to consistently ask you, how am I going to be active? How am I going to participate, right? And so since this first session, I want you to stay connected. I want to hear how you're going to continue to work. And I see some of the folks in the chat and talking about them staying motivated. Let's see, one person has been appointed within the NAACP. Wonderful. I love to see that and see that people are engaging in institutions that exist in our community. And yes, Jarvis, the small actions and scaling up, because if you start big and you fail, it's hard. It's hard to build people back up because you get people all excited and engaged. And this is why I don't like often doing engagement based upon electing a person, because there's there's a lot of science in politics, right? And being able to identify voters, being able to do the work and pulling people out. And the problem is people get excited and attached to a candidate, particularly if they're dynamic. And you have those great opportunities when people win, right? We saw that with, in our lifetime with Barack Obama. We saw that, to a lesser extent with Joe Biden in terms of beating, Trump for his next time, people building up and supporting a woman running. We see that in Texas was Jasmine Crockett. But then when it falls, and if that's people's first engagement, it like the apathy hits hard. The apathy hits hard. So starting with school board, starting with the local council, where in those races where people are winning with 50, 60, maybe 600 votes, and you can see some real change, or even starting with, getting a line item in the budget and getting $1 million in order to do city streetscape, right? In Albany, like they got $200 million to revitalize downtown. I happen to think that's chump change, but whatever. People are like, oh, we fought for something and we got it, right? And so being able to do that, gets people hooked, because then now they're ready for the next thing. Well, we got this. Now what else can we get in, next year's budget? Now that we know how the process works and we got, them to come up and clean trash regularly twice a week instead of once a week or once a month, like what's the next thing that we can do, right? Like, so you build that practice in small steps. And then when you get to the larger things, people are more comfortable where they're like, oh, we may not have won this one, but we increased turnout or we increased registration by, 60,000 people. That means if we get to 100,000 next time, and it's only 2 years from now, we can register more people in 2 years, right? Like, so people see the silver lining, and they're able to see, even in electoral senses, some of the failures, they're able to see what they're able to do, right? So yes, she didn't win, in this, but like, oh, in Texas, we're able to get to 46%. We're able to do, okay, what else can we build upon? Like, what can we do next, right? And we got 2 years to figure it out, right? Like, so if people are able to move from that standpoint. Santa Fe in saying that she or he, my apologies, I honestly thought voting was my only way to be engaged. I never wanted to get outside of my comfort level. This class has given me a roadmap to go beyond. Absolutely love that, right? And then this is information that you can take to others to be able to go from there, okay? So when we're talking about you doing this action, there are different types of civic engagement you can be involved in now that you have some of this basis of information. We talked about organizing in your community, and that can be against something, it can be for something, or it can be just the civic practice of, hey, let's get organized so that if something comes our way, we are able to collectively work together towards it. It's also understanding how power works around you, right? What is your local government? How is it structured? Are you in a village, or do you have a township? Is there a mayor that kind of serves just like as a corporate head? Are you in county government structure? That's really important to know the actual structure you're in. And I talk about that in Get Vote Ready, and understanding what your local power structure is. And you should do that even in your landscape analysis. Is it that you're going to the town council? Is it that you're going to the city council? Does the city council have districts, or does it have at-large seats? Like, being able to understand and know what your local government is, how it's set up, is important. One place you can go to do that is Ballotpedia. I love the folks over at Ballotpedia. You can put in your address and be able to determine, what your government structure is locally before you engage on, the federal level. And one thing that we definitely learned here during this session is to engage and start locally and statewide. This is critically important. Yesterday, I gathered branches from across our state and we participated in a lobby day. And one of the sessions of the Citizenship Lab that I do want to do is a how to. How do you execute a lobby day? How do you organize it? What does it look like? Who are the people involved? What do you say? How do you engage? So that is definitely one thing we want to do as it pertains to the Citizenship Lab and being able to teach people how to do that. And that's critically important, to be able to be in regular communication with those who represent you. I always say on the show, how can someone represent you if they don't hear from you? So you, as part of your civic practice, have to build in the process for you to regularly communicate with those who represent you. That can be, if they're a big social media person, like AOC online all the time, I would imagine that her constituents can view social media as a way to be in constant communication with her, in addition to going to meet her at our district office or in DC. This is also, like I mentioned, a midterm election. So the other thing that you can do in terms of expanding your civic practice is, which I mentioned, how are you going to be engaged during this midterm cycle? Are you going to register voters? Are you going to volunteer or work on a campaign? Are you going to donate to a campaign for the first time? Are you going to, track a ballot initiative that may be on your ballot? In Virginia, y'all are going to decide whether or not you're going to engage in midterm redistricting like California did, right? What do you know about that ballot question? How is it worded? Are you voting yes or are you voting no? What's the pros and cons of how that's being done? So those are things to consider in terms of expanding your practice. You can also engage by advocacy and policy change, right? I'm not going to engage on the electoral cycle. As a volunteer, I'll vote, I'll be an informed voter, but I want to focus my time on advocating for policy change as it pertains to the environment. Because our community is going to be fighting these data centers that are going to be, that are looking to be placed in our community. How are we going to get language codified so that this doesn't become a predatory site in our community? So I'm going to spend my time, meeting with legislators, meeting, with the governor, meeting with the commission that is identifying what the roles are and the parameters are. We're going to meet together in my basement, in my living room, and we're going to plan and draft language. And one thing I will say about the drafting of language is people often assume that you have to be a lawyer or you have to be a trained professional in order to write a law, draft a bill, or draft policy. Let me burst that bubble now. You do not. You absolutely do not. All right. You can take your idea, your language, your simple statement, and take that to those who represent you or who those may be on the committee, and let them, that's their job to write it in the language that is supposed to happen. I'll give you an example. There are two young girls, and I love this story. There are two young girls who hunt with their family, and in their local area, there was a law that required that you wore orange, bright color vest when you go hunt, so you could be seen and there would be no accidents happening. Well, these were two young girls and they were like, we don't want to wear orange. We want to wear pink. And so even though everybody buys the neon orange vest, we want to wear neon pink vests. And so they went and testified before their town council and said, instead of the language or 7 saying that you have to wear orange vests, why can't it say bright neon color? And then whatever bright neon color it is, people can decide to wear what it was. And they were like, okay, yeah, that's fine. And they changed the law. They had to do the legalese version, change the law. And that is two young girls. I think they were like 8 and 10 or 8 and 11 or something like that. They didn't go with a lawyer. They didn't go and say, like, therefore shall said color be. Nope. They went and presented the idea to the person who represented them, who invited them to testify upon the hearing in terms of changing the law, and it resulted in changing the law. Something very basic and very simple. And that's an example, right, of there may be laws on the books in your local town, in your community, whatever, that have just been there, has been there since the town was founded. Makes, everybody's like, that's just what it is. It don't make no sense, but that's what it is, or it hasn't been evolved for the times. Like, being able to be involved at that process in that level is game changing, because it again empowers people that we can collectively come together and change something that impacts us on a regular basis. So you don't even have to be a registered voter to be able to impact that as well, because they certainly weren't eligible to vote yet, but they went to their legislator to be able to change, to make a change that impacted them in their community. And we have to think about those small things and those things as well, right? So that's another way that we can be engaged. But I'm interested to see, and you can comment down in the comments and in the post how you plan to be engaged. What will be your civic practice just immediately going forward? Freeman talks about staying engaged in city council and the county boards, continuing to write and call elected officials. Another person mentioned they're going to be engaged in 2 areas, in the city council and the school board. Let me tell you, school board elections be won with decided by 7 votes, 16 votes, 30 votes. And in some places, you can go in and completely change the school board. I'll give you another example. Here in New York, there's a town called East Ramapo. And it was predominantly Black and Latino public school district. More and more people who were part of the, I think, Hasidic community or Orthodox, moved into the area. And because their population was increasing, including the voting population, they were able to run and get majority on the school board and completely change the investment of that town into public education. There's actually a documentary on it. Is it actually something that our Spring Valley branch is working on that engagement, because of the siphoning of resources to other non-public institutions at the detriment of the kids who are in public education. In the public schools in that respective district. But in some of these school boards, that's the reason why you saw this campaign of people going across the country and was it Moms for Liberty, Moms Against Liberty, Moms Fighting Liberty, Moms Who Don't Do Liberty, right? They were across the country going on and getting on school boards with one singular focus, right? Of banning books, changing curriculum and things of that nature. So these are won by small margins. And so that's what I'm talking about, being engaged locally, because those things then bubble up to the surface as you go down the line. But that is where you live every day. That is where your children are going to school every day. That is where your neighbor's children are going to school every day, and being able to contribute and engage in that way. So that is definitely another way to be involved from that standpoint. So in the survey, I am asking you, what future sessions do you want to see us engage? I mentioned wanting to do something on conducting a lobby day. I think also the art of conducting voter registration drives is lost on people these days. I would certainly love to do even at least a class on how you can do that, how to build coalitions. That is artful work. Because you may agree on one particular issue, on one particular law you want to get passed, but not agree on everything. And so how do you build a coalition that withstands those divisions? understanding more deeply elections and political strategy. Now, I'm partial to this because everybody becomes an armchair political strategist when it comes to election cycle, and people will, Monday morning quarterback elections all day. Well, they should have did this and they should have did this and they need to raise more money and they need to do that. So I think definitely understanding that a little bit more would be helpful. And a lot of these topics that we talked about, whether it's lobbying or building a coalition, building a campaign, mobilizing people and how to communicate with people. Just to do a call back really quickly, we've done shows on at Sunday Civics. So if you go to sundaycivics.org, you can see and listen to some of those shows from the past where we talked about how to be a effective lobbyist for your community, even without being like, I'm not talking about you going to be, in a lobbying firm. I'm talking about you individually, you collectively working with folks. We talked about engaging in budgets. We talked about building a lobby day. And so what we'll do is taking those classes, which you can go back and listen to on the Sunday Civics feed, but then also bringing it to Citizenship Lab to really get into the detail and you doing the homework of being able to actually execute on those things. Community building is hard work, but it is work that is necessary. We can't leave it up to other people to organize ourselves, to take care of our communities out of the goodness of our heart. Civic engagement is a practice that we need to be engaged in on a regular basis. And so here, what we're committed to do with Sunday Civics, with Citizenship Lab, is give you the tools necessary to be engaged in that practice, and not for you to do all of the things, because you still have to live. You still have a job. You still all of that. You still got to raise children, right? But it is for you to pick something, for you to decide, this is how I'm going to contribute. This is how I'm going to be in regular practice for my civic engagement in order to effectuate change, but also to be informed and engaged in our community. So I'm so thankful for those of you who joined us. Again, you can tune in to Sunday Civics Sunday morning. I'm actually putting together a great show for this Sunday on civic engagement in a time of war. Really excited about that. But I'm looking forward to continue to stay engaged. I'm looking forward to another session of Citizenship Lab. So please make sure to complete the survey so that we can get your input on what we do next. And with that, I am going to thank you all for joining me in this afternoon. And I will see you in these Nubia narrative streets. Thanks.